What's up, everybody? It's summertime here in North America. Although I am off from school right now, I'm still interested in making content, but what am I going to talk about? Because I don't have my school day to talk about. So I had this idea. I thought I could spend some of my time this summer making videos that focus on kids that are on the fringe. And what I mean when I say that is like kids that fall into like they're maybe 20% of your classroom makeup or less. But that we don't, because they make up such a small minority of your class size, we don't talk about them so much. There aren't PD trainings on them, or if it is, it's real quick. And so I wanted to go out and find folks that were educated enough, informed enough to speak about some of these student groups, right? Because I realize, you know, the longer I teach, the more I realize and the more comfortable I am with the fact that I don't know everything. But doesn't mean someone else out there doesn't. And so last month I was at a conference in New York City and I went to a session that was called something, I don't remember the exact name, but it's essentially like how do we care for and teach kids whose parents are in the criminal justice system? Or really, what do you do when you have students whose parents are or have been incarcerated? And these two women led the group, Vivett Davis and Whitney Hollins, and they spoke about their work, their story, kind of like how they got into this. I just thought it was so powerful that I wanted to give them a platform to kind of talk about their story. And so in this video, look, the connection is terrible. It's very glitchy. It is not like good production quality, but I think that doesn't matter when you watch it, because I think what these women are saying is so important and so powerful and needs to be heard that I think my hope is that you'll be able to see past that and really be able to kind of hone in on what they are saying. We talked about everything from what it's like for Vivett to be married to someone that is incarcerated, for what it was like for Whitney to grow up with a father that was incarcerated. We talk about what should you do if a student tells you that their parent is incarcerated? Or if you know someone that's in prison, should your children tell their teacher? Should they not? Should they keep it a secret? Talk about the power of speaking your truth. And Vivett had a great answer on how to turn your classroom into a safe space. So I hope you watch this. I hope you get a lot out of it. If you have any questions for myself or for one of these women, go ahead and leave your comment in the comment section below and I'll make sure that they see it and that they can get back to you. If you have something of a more private nature, you can go ahead and email me. My email is in the section below where all the other stuff is, like our PO box and Pinterest and all that stuff. Just go ahead and email me and I'd be happy to get back to you. And if it's something for one of these women, just go ahead and email me and I'll shoot it to them. Gang, thanks for taking the time to watch a video that isn't about the majority of your students, but maybe a very small number of your students. It makes a big difference. You are making a big difference. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Sunday Teacher Talk. And tonight, as I've said before, this month we're going to focus on something a little bit different than what we typically talk about, which is typically, you know, trying to give folks some hope on Sunday night when you're getting ready for work on Monday morning and you're terrified. So this month, what we're hoping to do is had this idea that if we could shine a light on students that are often overlooked, and I'm not always the person to be able to shine that light, but I can offer the platform and invite people into that know far more than what I know. And so tonight I have two guests. I have Whitney Hollins and I have Vivett Dukes, and they know a lot. I met them at a conference in New York last year, a lot about kind of helping students that are dealing with like having a parent in the criminal justice system or having a sibling there or growing up having had parents or a loved one in that situation, and kind of how do we enter into that space with kids and kind of meet them where they are so we can bring them up to where they need to be. So welcome, ladies. Can you talk? I feel so official when I talk like that. I just feel like every talk show that ever happened in the history of the world. But in no certain order, could you just give us a little bit of a glimpse, like who are you, where do you teach, what's your story, and how did you why do you have an interest in this? I think it's it's got to be a small pool, it feels like, but where did your interest stem from for this topic?
Okay, so I'm Whitney. Hi. And I think for both of us, our interest is very personal with the topic. I grew up in Maryland. I currently in Queens, New York. I'm in an elementary school. I teach special education. But growing up during almost my whole childhood, my father was incarcerated. He did 20 years in a federal prison. Actually, he is just about to celebrate his 1-year anniversary of being home with us. And before that, he was incarcerated 2 prior times. So through a lot of my school career, my father was incarcerated. And now I've become a teacher. And once I became a teacher, I started to realize that, I had students who had an incarcerated parent, but they weren't talking about it. And it kind of took me back to my own childhood, where I never communicated with any of my teachers that my dad was incarcerated, and none of them ever asked. And it was just not a space that we spoke about it. So yeah, that's how I sort of, and once I became open with my students about my own personal experience, then I had children who were coming to me and telling me about what was going on with them. And Vivett and I actually connected because we are part of the SPIRS Bureau at the Osborne Association, which is an association that helps incarcerated families or dealing with incarceration. And we met and we connected, just basically opening up about our personal experiences.
Wow, I already have like 10 questions, but Vivett, could you give a little bit of your story too, and then I have a whole slew of things I want to ask you about.
All right, cool. So my husband is incarcerated. I'm a teacher. I grew up on Long Island. I teach in Queens. Also, I teach in the middle school and high school. I teach 7th grade. For 4 years, I taught at an all-boys school, which was directly eroded as a result of correspondence to the school-to-prison pipeline to really address that issue that affects disproportionately so many Black. So my experience with the school-to-prison pipeline went from theoretical to personal, and then marrying a man, then it became like up close in my face, like this is my life. And I was not upfront involved with my husband being incarcerated for a time, even though I was very happy within my marriage. And I actually saw a son of mine in the line on a visit to see my husband. And so that was a very sobering and stark reality for me. Choose to not address this and hide, or I could really be upfront, speak my truth, and empower my students to do the same. And by me doing that, I have come in contact with so many students who have someone who's incarcerated in their family, and they just keep it all in, and no one knows. And it explains so much about them once that piece of the puzzle of their life is known. Then a lot of the I'm like, oh, that's why. Okay, that's why. So that's why I'm here and meeting Whitney to actually meet like a real life person, aside from my stepdaughter who has had a parent who's incarcerated, who defies the stereotype. Because even in my own mind, I had this full like, oh, they're all so sorry and what's going to happen to them and using drugs or, and she's nothing like that. She's a doctoral student. She's thriving. And I'm like, wow, this is such a great example for my own students to see. Like, your life does not have to be defined by your parents' incarceration. So, yeah.
That alone that could be the title of a book. So I have a number of questions, and either one of you can chime in, even if I address one of you. But so you talked about, what would you say first to a teacher that I've had any number of students that have had parents locked up, and we don't always get told either. Like, the school isn't always a good communicator, and I'm not even sure whether they should be or not. Like, first of all, do you feel like schools should let teachers know that? Should that be something that you would trust students to come forward with? Or how would that information get shared? And then what should teachers do if they find out that that's the case in their classroom? Like, you find out that someone's dad got locked up or has been locked up for a long time. And then what do you do with that information?
Well, I think in my experience, the school has never come to me and told, this student has a parent who's incarcerated. Sometimes, because I actually teach special education, I could look through their social history or their IEPs that I may find out this information. But no one from the schools actually ever come to me and said that. And I think it's because it's it's a taboo subject. And people don't know how to approach it. They sometimes I think people feel like it's better off not being talked about. They think it's going to be too traumatic for the child to discuss. But I think one of the things to do is create a safe space. It's limited, but there are books out there, children's books that deal with the topic of incarceration. Even reading the book to them, you may not say like this is for this student or this is, but open up that conversation and having that and allowing them to share. To know that, you're aware that this is happening. Let them come and talk to you. It may take them a while to come and talk to you, but I think the biggest thing you could do is not that you have to even do much of anything except for be a safe space and be a place to listen and be open to what they have to say. And really the benefit is to you. Once you have this information, then you can go and you can deal with this child in a whole different way. You can be more aware of what you say to them. Like, for example, if they're making Mother's Day school and your child's mother is incarcerated, that might trigger them. And if you didn't know that information, you're like, why are you flipping out right now? Versus know that you can be proactive about how you plan to deal with that situation if it comes up. So I really think it's a benefit to you to know, but you don't have to do much of anything besides just creating a space where they feel safe to talk about it. And if you don't feel like you're comfortable with your knowledge or talking about, do some research or reach out to people or say, hey, I feel like I don't know a lot about this. Can you talk about it? But yeah, I think just being open-minded and creating that space is the most important thing that you could do.
Absolutely. Just to piggyback on what Whitney said, a classroom library is so pivotal in addressing this and a variety of issues. So making sure you have books that represent incarceration, that represent students dealing with it, that represent struggles in life and not just the canon of texts that are often found in classroom libraries. I think that's a first you can do. There's also something called the Incarcerated Children's Bill of Rights. You can get that online, the Osborne Association information on their website. And I bring them up because they're an organization that has helped myself and my husband directly. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't be, because I wouldn't know Whitney, Go on their website, get it. It's free. Laminate, hang it up. Can
you say what that is one more time so I can write it down? Because I want to put it in the show notes as well so folks can just link on it.
Sure. The Osborne Association.org.
Okay.
They also have, not only do they have the Incarcerated Children's Bill of Rights, they have a postcard on proximity. They have short fact sheets on humanizing language, so watching how we speak about incarcerated individuals to the children instead of calling them ex-cons and felons, saying the parent who's incarcerated or simply calling them by their parent, whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of good resources on there as well. Mm-hmm. We Got Us Now is another excellent site. On We Got Us Now, they do a campaign called Love Letters, where if you know that you have a child who you can have them log on and send like a postcard to their parent, and the service is free. So helping them stay connected in school. So I'm going to say this because I went through it and I experienced it myself. I didn't have any of these organizations or know about these organizations when I was growing up. I had to go and search them out. Right. And I ended up searching them out when I was doing search for my dissertation. But they're there if you're willing to go and look for them. So I don't want to make it seem like they're going to fall into anyone's lap. They're probably not. And if you're not involved in the relation, you really wouldn't know about them. But if you do go and look, there are various organizations, especially if you're in big cities, that cater towards this population and have a lot of valuable resources that you could use if you're not sure where to start.
Absolutely.
That's really, that part about language. I don't know why that's weird noise, but could you grab it for me real quick? So my wife is sitting over here. She's the invisible helper on the side. That's who I'm looking at all the time, writing notes down and stuff. So I think that language piece is so important, even in general in teaching, because even as I was speaking, as I was asking you the question, I was referring to students whose parents are locked up. I'm thinking, I don't know if that term is all right. Like, that's what my boys, I teach all boys in West Philadelphia. So so a lot of times I'll just mirror whatever it is that they're saying. And I just think that that's interesting because I think that opens up a whole conversation with students sometimes as to like what makes you like what hurts your feelings if I say it, or like what's the best way to sort of communicate with you about this. And that can just kind of I think that puts the ball in kids' court and makes them feel like they have some power in that conversation as well. What would you say to like, if your own children were going to school, would you want them to tell the teacher? How would you want them to go about that, or not? Or how would they let teachers know if you wanted them to know about the fact that they had a parent or even a sibling that was incarcerated?
Right. So I think that's a good point, because you see sometimes where children were told not to tell anyone. That does happen. And a lot of times is a reaction to stigma that comes with incarceration. So when I was growing up, I never had a conversation with my mother where she said, don't tell. But it just didn't seem relevant to me for me to tell anyone at school. I mean, I wasn't particularly struggling at school. I was, still doing fine. So it's just not anything that ever got brought up, versus if you have a kid who may be having some issues, then it may be trying to dig deeper to figure out what's going on. Right. As far as children who have come to me and to me at school, they've kind of done it in their own way. I had a student who told me, oh, it's my birthday this weekend, blah, blah, blah. Oh, that's, that's nice. That's good. He was like, yeah, I want to show you something. My dad drew me a picture. And I was like, oh, okay. And I'm just thinking, and then he showed me the picture, and I recognized what the picture was. That the picture had come from a prison. So I was asking, I was like, oh, so, and then he started talking to me, but that was his way to sort of lead in to the conversation. And this was after I had already told the class that, my father was incarcerated. So it took him a while to come to me and say that. If I had my own child, and I would want them to share that information. But I'm saying that I am and what I know and my own viewpoint, and my whole agenda is wanting this to be destigmatized and open, and people be able to talk about this, and educators be able to help these children the way that they can. I also have a complete understanding for parents and caregivers that don't want them to tell. There have been numerous studies that show that teachers have bias towards children who have incarcerated parents. So that's completely relatable and understandable to me.
I think I would prefer the student to share it with me, him or herself. I work with older students, and I think by that age, just students know who they can trust and who they can't. And I'm always really transparent about my husband's incarceration, because there are days when I go into work when I'm not my best. On a Monday after a visit on Sunday, I might have had an issue with a correctional officer. It might have been a long wait to get in. I might have missed out and had to sit an hour in the visiting room floor to wait for him. Those things are little traumas that carry over. And so having that experience with my students, because the reality is my students and I spend more time with each other than I do with my own family, and vice versa. We're together for a long time every day, 6 hours every day. So I would prefer, and my experience has been, students have come to me. Now, sometimes the situation, as I mentioned earlier, just outed itself. And so in that situation, it really was like this life or death stare, like this never happened and go our own ways, and I will never mention it. Or we know we share something now and we can move forward. I chose to make the first steps because I didn't want it to be awkward, and it was a teachable moment, to show the student like, hey, hi, I'm here to see my husband. Who are you here to see? And then that broke down walls. And then I guess the word got out, like Ms. Dukes has a husband who's incarcerated. So then other students came to me also. And it was very sad for me to know that so many students had a parent who was incarcerated and didn't say anything, and just dealing with that. It's hard for me to deal with an educated adult with mechanisms and skills. And it's hard for me. What is it like for them?
Sure. Especially, I think one of the things folks forget is that when you're young, you're not sure, like, especially when you're a teenager and the hormones start going and you're going through so many changes anyway, and you're trying to figure out, you see a big transition, I'm sure, working with middle school students where your whole life you've kind of believed what your parents told you to believe. And then when you hit this point in your life, you're trying to think, well, how do I feel about this sort of stuff? And I've had one of the projects I do every year that is, I never thought it would be as telling as it is. That was not my reason for doing it, but it's definitely my reason now, where I have students, before we read the book, The Odyssey, they have to write out their own life odyssey in 10 events from birth to now. How did you become the person that you've become now? And I give a pretty easy version of sort of like where I came from, the fact that like I lost my father when I was young and lost my mom, and how I became a teacher. And when students started sharing this, and one of my students that's watching this right now, Amir, shared, and he's just said in the comments too, so I'm not afraid to share this, that his father had been locked up for a very long time. And I just remember the first time hearing that, it kind of took me by surprise, because I've had students come to me and share all kinds of stuff with me privately, but never it's not usually in front of a class full of other individuals. And so for someone to share something like that, it was very well received. I felt like everyone was very respectful of the fact that he brought this up, but it just created a chain of events that kids were just dropping these huge things like, my mom died, I live in foster care, I have to live with my grandmother because my parents are addicted to drugs. Crazy things that kids were bringing up. And so I felt like I had to go back the following year and make my life odyssey much more vulnerable. And the value in that, I think, is just like you were saying, is to create this space where I'm willing to be super vulnerable, but as a result, that's going to provide, like, it makes your room a safe space. It makes you more of a human being. It makes you someone kids can connect with that maybe do not have anyone else to connect with. And I just think that's, like, we can't communicate that message enough to our students that, like, this is a safe space. I want you to be able to talk to me. And then when kids start telling you stuff, it's really, really surprising.
Right.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that I think that sometimes, even in teacher prep programs or things like that, that people view or being vulnerable as sort of counter to having classroom men, whatever the case may be. And I really think we need to move away from that, because this authoritarian, I'm, not human, I'm a robot, I don't have feelings, I don't have emotions, it's just not where we're at. It doesn't work. And I think actually being vulnerable and being human is a very powerful classroom management tool that you could have if you choose to use it in a correct way. And I really think there needs to be someone saying that and being open with, new teachers, that old rule where people say, don't smile for the first 6 months. Well, no, be yourself, be genuine. The kids know when you're not being genuine. But also that being vulnerable or being human doesn't make you weak as well. And that's important to know.
And I think the world that we're living in now, it mandates that we change our teaching styles, our classroom engagement styles. It is mandatory that we create a caring class, because quite frankly, the world is, we don't have a caring world. That's not what our students are growing up seeing. They're seeing turmoil and racism and sexism. That's what they're growing up with. And if they can't find that safe school, where are they going to find it? That is, like, for teachers, it's very important that a child should be able to come to you and tell you anything. And even if you're like, deal with it, work with them, help them, because the fact that they chose you to come to says a lot. Honored when they come to me and tell me things that are very deeply personal, because I've connected with them way beyond English language arts. That's my job as a teacher.
Yeah, I use that same exact language when someone ever tells me. I try to stay away from I try to stay away from saying things like "I'm sorry," because I don't want. I don't know what response a child always wants. Sometimes I just feel like they just need to tell someone, but I always let them know that I'm utterly honored at the fact that you would share something so profound with me. And I look at it as sort of like you're giving someone a gift, right? Like you're the one I picked to have this conversation with, and you don't always have to know the right thing to say. Like, just, you can, it can just be about them. It doesn't have to be about you like dropping the right knowledge on that kid and then like illuminating their life. Nope. It's just kind of, the difference between being sympathetic and empathetic, like actually sitting in the muck of them and just letting them feel bad, but knowing that they're not doing that alone is huge. What do you do about, so what don't people know about kids? So, I mean, I guess this is two really interesting perspectives. So Whitney, what don't people know about kids that are growing up with a parent that's incarcerated? And Vivett, what don't folks understand about like, a mother and a wife of folks that are incarcerated? What are some like things that people think they know, and what stuff might they not know at all?
Right. So for me, I think what people don't know is just really how diverse the population is, how many people affects. I mean, we're at the point where we have 2.2 million people incarcerated, 50% of those parents to children under the age of 18. And that doesn't mean they only have one child. They could have multiple children. This is, numbers that are in the millions throughout the country. So people probably may think, oh, well, I've never had a child who has an incarcerated parent. And you probably, so I think that's one thing that people aren't aware of, that they think that it's in certain populations, it's only in certain neighborhoods, it's only here or there, or what the case may be, but it's really quite widespread. Two, I think that people don't realize the negative connotations or the prejudice that they may have against incarceration. A lot of times the feelings that people have about incarcerated individuals trickles down to their children. They make assumptions about the type of families they come from, what their home life may be like. Sometimes they make assumptions that the children are better off without the parent. And no matter what the parent did, that's still, so there's still, in most cases, a deep love there between the child and parent, regardless of what they're incarcerated for, about what they may be incarcerated for, or your view of them, that's still that child's parent and needs to be respected as their parent. And if you don't do that, you risk violation with the child. But for me, I think one of the biggest things that they don't see are success stories of children who have incarcerated. Sometimes we hear about recidivism and we hear about school to prison pipeline and we hear about, children who have incarcerated parents are more likely to be incarcerated themselves. And we hear all these things that get attached to incarceration that makes these kids be shown in a negative light. But there are a lot of success stories, people who have had this experience. They may not speak about it, but who have grown up, who have used this. A lot of children who have incarcerated parents are extremely resilient. That's important too. Just that piece where we realize that, number one, this is a lot of. Number two, that's still their parent, regardless of how you feel about whatever was done, and they still love their parent and more than likely want to have a relationship with them. And that comes with to be completely transparent, I love my father. I still have some issues with my father or some feelings about him, but that doesn't change the fact that I acknowledge him as my father and I love, my father. So you can have those set of conflicting emotions about the experience, but still have that love for your parent. And just the third part being that parental incarceration isn't something that determines the path that you're going to take in life. So I just hope that, more people are open about speaking about it, talking about it, bringing it into classrooms, but also showing examples of success in that realm, letting these children see. And it's not just for the children who have incarcerated parents, even the children who don't have incarcerated parents, that you can have life experiences like this, or there are people out there like this, and they're still good people, they're still productive people, they're still successful people. That is important for me.
Absolutely. As the wife of a man who's incarcerated, I think the biggest thing I'd like people to know, our marriage is real. It's a loving marriage, the same things that anyone has to do to make their marriage work, we have to do it also. If anything, we have to try that much harder because there are obvious obstacles to us being together, communicating with each other, spending quality time with each other. But this idea of you're a prison wife, I hate that. Because what does that mean? Like I'm only his wife because he's in prison, or in some this connotation that there's some type of deficit in our marriage because he's incarcerated. I think there's an image of a woman who's married to an incarcerated man that she's somehow a low life or lacking, low self-esteem, that there's something wrong with her, when I'm none of those things. So there's always this shock, like, oh, a professional woman like you has a husband who's incarcerated? Yeah. And there are a lot of us, so I think this idea that, he's on drugs, she's on drugs, and these two destitute people who found each other, that narrative is not always true. Nothing is always true. That kind of really seeing that the marriage is legitimate. I feel like I have to really try hard to make that known. You know what I mean? Or for people to respect my marriage. Like, yes, I'm married. You might not see my husband every day, but it's real. He exists. I love him. He loves me. Don't say things that are crazy, anything to disrespect our marriage, that I believe if it were different circumstances, people wouldn't dare do it. Even calling me by my maiden name. Like, that's disrespectful. I'm Mrs. someone. You know what I mean? I'm Mrs. Duke. So things like that do trigger me and do bother me because I think it's against my marriage. But it does help me to understand the plight of my students. And one thing Whitney said that was so huge is, mentioned earlier, that a child who has an incarcerated parent is not damned to life, like damned to hell, is not damned to a horrible life. I have a stepdaughter, and like Whitney, she thrives. She's a registered nurse, and her father's been incarcerated for the majority of life. And you would never know that unless she told you. Like, if Whitney didn't, I wouldn't know. And I think some of it, children with incarcerated parents, they try even harder, because they know what people think of them or what they think about them, and they're often right. So there is this, like, I'm going to go extra hard and be even that much greater because I don't want you to judge me by of my parent. I don't even want you to judge my parent by their actions because that's just one snapshot in their entire life. And so I could go on for a while, so I'll stop there because I'm getting passionate.
It's a really important topic, I think, too, though, because in teaching, so to give you sort of a snapshot of where I am, West Philadelphia, my students are about 99% African American. It's all boys school, and we have like one Asian kid, one white kid, and one Hispanic kid, and we bring them together if we're like in a paper for something or if we need a brochure, so we look real diverse. But other than that, it's a lot of students who I think this statistic is somewhere between 85 and 90% of my boys do not have a dad that's around, right? And we learn that through interviews when the school year begins. So just kind of find out, like, who's the support system at home. And I deal with a lot of moms or work with a lot of moms who are just, they're nervous that their kids, their male role models are making bad decisions, and they're nervous that their kids are going to kind of go down that same path. So I hear what you're saying, and I don't know what to tell folks all the time. Like, I only see the kids usually when they're in school, so it's a hard thing. You feel like there's this weight on you to kind of like help out, but there's not always a good, you don't always have an answer as to what to do. But how? I don't know exactly how to phrase this. This might make me sound really like an idiot, but it's my show, so I get telling you. What would you say to students who their parents have been incarcerated, that they feel like folks are looking down on them, looking down on their parent? Like, so for Whitney, how did you kind of end up so well? And I don't mean to say that in a way that like, oh, it's so surprising that you did that. And Vivett, even with your stepdaughter, like, what were things that were important steps to make sure that you while you're dealing with all of this heavy emotional stuff, you're still, able to rise above that? What would you say to kids who are kind of dealing with that situation themselves?
Well, I think that we need to teach kids to be critical thinkers. And when you have a kid who says, like, I think that people are looking down upon me because I have an incarcerated parent, or they're looking bad at my parent, that's probably true. Not everybody, but that feeling that you have is absolutely valid. Even if you go through and you look at some of the research that's out there, you know, there's studies that say kids who have incarcerated mothers have lower IQs. There's all of these, you know, there are things out there that would make you, not just anecdotals, but actual published research that sort of perpetuates that notion. So I think acknowledging their feelings is extremely important, and letting them know, like, that's the case, and you're going to encounter people who are going to look down upon you. But that being said, they need to, number one, you know, depending on the kid's age, and when you start talking about mass incarceration and the disproportionality of mass incarceration in this country is something that, you know, with older kids that you could definitely talk about, the racial disparity and things like that, that the justice system is not always just for everyone, and it doesn't work the same way for everyone. And that's something that you could talk about and you could debate and you could have your own opinions and someone else could have their own opinions. But I do think, you know, it's worthwhile bringing up, you know, talking about the war and talking about these times where, you know, whole communities were left without men in their, you know, in their presence. So that happened, that critical thinking. But that being said, I honestly didn't start engaging with that until I was older. When I was young, you know, I think what Vivett kind of said is true. I wanted to prove people, I wanted to do so well that before people even found out, I was already up here. So that when that happened, and it took me down, I was still kind of where I wanted to be. Because it does, you know, it does happen. And even when you're trying to be kind about it, it's kind of condescending, where you tell them that you're doing X, Y, and Z, and they find out your parents incarcerated. They're like, oh, wow, look at you. That's amazing. And it's like, no, you know, for a lot of these kids, it's their normal, right? It's their way of life. And if you're accepting of the fact that that's their way of life and that people live different ways and they have different types of families, and that, you know, you show them examples that even though this happened, that people will continue and you move forward. And I think that's extremely important. But I think it's important for other people to understand that, yes, it's traumatic. I'm not saying that it's not. And yes, it is painful. But a lot of these kids, it's their day to day and they're just pushing through, you know, and they want a safe space to talk. They want someone to be able to talk to, but they don't want pity. You know, because there's a difference between you having empathy and you having pity, or, you know, whatever. They don't want pity. They don't want treatment. You have to be understanding. I mean, I have a kid in my class who, his mother's not incarcerated, but he's currently in foster care. And when he has visits with her, he do his homework that night. And so I don't yell and scream at him the next day because his homework is not done. Luckily, someone communicated with me visits on these days. So when he comes in the next day, if his homework's not done, we'll take care of it. But having, you know, an understanding adults is extremely important. But I really just think, too, that it's important to have those role models for these children to see that that narrative isn't true. I mean, one of the best things we can do about that narrative, people looking down upon you, they think that you're going to be X, Y, Z, is show them, like, no, you're not. This person had the same exact experience and they're just they're fine. They're A-okay. So I think that piece is extremely important, too. And I, you know, would call everybody, if there's educators out there, you know, professionals, whatever the case, if you've experienced this, to be willing to speak about your experience, because I don't think that you may understand how it could do for a child who's currently experiencing this, someone who's like them, the grown-up version of themselves.
So one of the myths is that incarcerated parents are not involved in their children's lives. So in the case of my stepdaughter, her dad has been actively a part of her life as much as he could be from behind the wall. You know, so I think there is this perception that incarcerated parents are deadbeats. Not necessarily. And they try really hard. I can speak for my, he's hard to be a presence in his daughter's life. And so she has had the benefit of knowing her father and having him to listen to and to hear her and to guide her as parents do. I think it's very, very, very critical to note that children that have incarcerated parents have a set of resiliency and coping skills that unless you're in it, and I'm from the outside looking in, Whitney, you're the expert of it, like they just cope in ways that I am amazed by. That they just get it. Like I have to move forward. Not all, but 9 times out of 10, I've seen more of the resiliency than the apathy. And I'm glad to say that because I think the image of a child with an incarcerated parent is one that's very frazzled. I think emotionally they are very frazzled because it is a very frazzled thing to have the one you love not be with you and to go through such hardships to be together. You know? But positive role models are, put it this way, like having an incarcerated parent is just one of the many things that could be wrong in someone's life, right? We all need, like, Oprah and Michael Jordan are great, love them, but they need like real life. Like I need Whitney in my classroom to come in like, hello, real, you know what I mean? Like stop listening to what others are saying about you because they don't know. What they saw on the news last night, they don't know. You know, and that's hard as a child because they feed into what people say. It's hard as an adult, to be honest with you. But the transparency and showing real life people, and there are many real life people who have been where they are. There are many men and women that come out of prison who are doing great advocacy work, great work to help children because they know what they've done too. They know how their actions messed up so many people. And they're hard to them. So the Osborne Association, I can't mention, they do all of this work. They really try to make these things happen. And
it's fantastic. I really appreciate that you said this is only one of the things that could be going on in a child's life, as if there are, you know, I think if your parent is incarcerated, it's very obvious that there's, you know, it's easier to put the shame on them. But you could have a father or a mother or a family that just doesn't take care of you at all, and you all live together, right? That could be a very toxic environment for a child. But it looks like many times that, you know, he has a dad around. So my guys at school, if they find out someone has a father, it's almost like you don't even have anything to complain about, bro, because your dad's like around. So you're not part of the group, or you can't have a say in the conversation when just because your dad is around or your mom's around doesn't mean that things are copacetic at home, and they can be very toxic. What could you talk, Vivett, you said a number of times that how your husband has been very active in your stepdaughter's life. In what ways? Like, so what might that look like to someone that's just kind of wondering, can you create like that picture for someone, like what that would look like for your, what did that look like for your stepdaughter?
So writing letters is important. That's the main form of communication, especially as a child, as a young girl. Like it's a duty of someone else to bring her up to see her dad. But he could do whatever he had the ability to do. He did it. Wrote letters. Didn't miss a birthday. Now, all of this couldn't be done on his own. He's been very fortunate to have a very strong support system on the outside, a very close-knit group of friends, his mom who would be his hands and feet. So, hey, it's her birthday. Make sure she gets flowers. She gets, he'll mail her card. He'll just, whatever he can do to let her know, like, I'm here and I'm never forgetting about you, always thinking about you, And that means a lot because she's an adult now, a professional, can say that to me. Like, my dad has never missed a birthday. There has not been a week that has gone by where my father has not called me. He calls her every day. So for some people that might sound extreme, but I would ask, how many parents here today on the outside can say that they spend a dedicated half an hour every day to talk to their child? Whether it be on the phone, in person, not that many. not that many. So
Yeah, I think we've mistaken someone being in the house with you as you're spending time together. But if you're doing your thing, or your kids are playing video games and you're not having that face-to-face time, like actual intentional time, it's not the same. It's all about that intentional time. And even as a father, that's one of the things I have to remind myself all the time, is to not just get wrapped up in what I need to get done in the day, but to actually sit down and have FaceTime. My kids call it FaceTime, which is hilarious. They don't know what actual FaceTime is, but they're just like, oh, we have FaceTime. They also call that when I kiss my wife. They're like, oh, we have a FaceTime. No, mind your business and stop being weird. So I have a question here from, I am notoriously bad at pronouncing names. So I think it's Rattel Badger is saying, I teach a 9-year-old boy from a fairly stable, if not dysfunctional home situation. He's got nowhere near as hard as some of the other families from my school, but for some reason he reckons prison is the best thing that he can hope for. Any advice for him?
I'm sorry, the child said he thinks prison is the best thing he can hope for?
Yeah, that's kind of like what he's looking at as his best case scenario. I mean, he's 9 also, but how would you speak to that? Like, how do you even start a conversation with that child? And then what advice would you have for the teacher even?
Well, I mean, interesting to me, just because I'm wondering where the idea of prison being the best place from. But also because he's 9, maybe the reality of what prison is hasn't set in. I mean, you don't have to get super in depth, but just the fact, do you like to go outside when you like to go outside? Mm-hmm. Do you like to eat when you want to eat, when you're hungry? Do you like your games? Because those are all things that are not going to happen if you're, in prison. But then too, also maybe tapping into his interests and, something he could be successful at, because right now he doesn't seem to me like he thinks he has any arena to be successful. And I do think school can be a place that beats you down if you don't fall into certain academic categories. Like if you're not a wonderful reader, if you're not a wonderful writer, if you're not great at math, then you're kind of, not a success at school. And I think it's our job as educators to, we talk about multiple types of intelligences and, these type of things, but then we don't always encourage that, because school is very much reading, writing, math. And if you're good at that, yay, wonderful. And if you're not, it's like, oh my goodness. Right. And the kids get the feeling that they can't do anything. So he seems very down on himself. He seems like he hasn't been successful, and maybe finding, his area where he can succeed and be useful. And I don't know the child, so it also cry for it, maybe saying provocative things to get someone to engage with him in a conversation. And I don't know what that conversation may be. Maybe he wants to talk about incarceration in general as it pertains to his family or a loved one. Maybe he just feels like he's to tell him, like, you're good. Like, no, maybe he just wants someone to say, like, no, that's not the path for you. Yeah. You could do 1,000,001 things. So I'm not sure exactly what it be, but it is. But it sounds to me like he needs someone to talk to and needs to feel successful in some area, or at least someone to believe that he is capable of being successful.
I would recommend a teacher give the child, and you could do it for the whole class so the child is not singled out, give them something called a student interest survey. So it just asks them a series of questions, and they rate how good they are, what they're interested in, something like, do you like to read? What do you do in your free time? It's a series of questions, and that gives a way to just
Oh, you froze up. Can you hear what I'm saying? I'm sorry. That froze. You were saying about the sort of the questionnaire and asking students about, what was it?
It's called a student interest survey. Okay. You can go online and find it. I learned about it in graduate school just to tap into students' reading interests, but they have them for anything. It doesn't only have to be about reading. And even in finding out what they like to read or that they don't like to read, you can ask them, well, what do you like doing? And even if they give a generic answer, which most kids give, like playing video games, what kind of video games? You've got to learn about them, tap into something so you could even be like, yo, that's awesome. Like, you're really great at this. Have you ever thought about a career in graphic design, or, you know what I mean? Or you have an amazing imagination that you can create all these things. Do you like to draw? Like, whatever it is, you as the teacher can tap into that and give them some real, show them things. Like, oftentimes it takes someone outside of ourselves to show us what we're good at. This child may really just be doodling on their paper, and you could see, like, you're an amazing artist, you know, and just once you get that, you can hook them. That's the hook. You can reel them in. So that's like just a very solid bit of suggestion I would give, is that interest survey. Find out what they're into and then take it from there.
And I think
such a big thing, yeah.
Collaborate with other resources you have in the building. You know, at some point you may want to speak to the guidance counselor and say, hey, have you ever had any interactions with the student? Do you know anything about them? Just curious, because, you know, not to say that you have to turn into a whole big thing where now he feels like it's being singled out, but maybe someone gives you some information, maybe doing a lesson within the class about finding our talents, or, you know, other people. So I think that, yeah, I agree with you that student just may be looking for someone to notice
that's
something.
Concerning. That's concerning at 9 to think that you're going to end up in prison. That's a definite red flag. And for the teacher who knows about it to just kind of brush it off, that's not good either. So I'm really happy for the question, because that shows there's something in this teacher that's like, this is not right. What can I do?
And then also you want to know where that came from.
Right.
Where did that come from? That thought. And I say where does it come from? Because I have heard teachers say that about students. And usually not to their face, but we know that kids are very perceptive. We know that kids hear things, or we think we're saying something. You know, I'm talking to my colleague, and I think the child doesn't hear. So that could have very well came from someone, or from someone he had previously. He may have heard that from someone, and maybe now he's saying it to her to say, oh, okay, is this what you think too? Right. Or I'm letting you know this is what people think about me. I mean, I've never had a child say this to me. I've had a child come to me and say, oh, well, I'm bad. Right. I didn't call them bad, you know, but they were letting me know already, like someone had told them I'm bad. And now I'm going to let you know in advance that this is what it is. Right. So, you know, I would, you know, want to take some time to investigate also, where did that come from?
That's such a good point, that they're kind of mimicking what they've already heard from someone else. I've never thought of that this is like, maybe their mom said that to them, or an uncle, or a friend, or another teacher, or someone. That's I think that could be really important. And one of the things I keep hearing you sort of talk about is asking students questions. So one of the questions I get the most is, I'm sort of, one of my biggest sort of focuses in school is building student relationships. I just think it's the answer to almost everything. You have a kid that doesn't care. You have a kid that's a behavioral issue. You have a kid, anything, that if you can build a relationship with them, and my take on that is a little bit of like, when I was a teenager, there weren't very many adults that willingly talked to me, right? Because you're a teenager. Most people are just annoyed by teenagers, and they just sort of brush you off, or they don't have time for that, or they're too busy. But the folks that did take the time to ask, like, how I actually felt about something, or what I thought about something, I just remember thinking they were sort of elevated in my mind. And I think doing that for all students, and one of the things I like talking about on my YouTube channel is this idea that, you know, there are the kids that we want to teach that are they're just sort of, they're good. They do their homework. They are interested in what you're teaching, and who doesn't want to teach that kid? And then the other kid that gets most of our attention is the kid that's the behavioral issue, right? So we're always putting out that fire. But then there are always these kids in the middle. I refer to them as number 2 students, that they fail at the end of the year, and you didn't even know, because they kind of sit there quietly and they don't make a lot of noise. But you don't realize that they're sort of silently suffering with any number of issues. How do you, and I think this is especially important because the both of you are women teachers, and I get a lot of questions where I'm often asked to bring female staff members on that are some of my colleagues to sort of say from their point of view, how do you make that safe space, especially when a lot of female teachers that contact me feel like if they get too close, it's going to be read the wrong way. They think they're creating a safe space for students, but they're really making it, they feel like an unsafe space for themselves. How do you successfully navigate creating a safe space for students, and how do you kind of draw them into that?
Right. I think that question is almost like, how do you create a cozy home? Like, I could watch all the Martha Stewart and HGTV and follow everything they do to a T, but that coziness in my home comes from me, comes from I think a lot of teachers need to address, how do you really feel about the students you teach? Do you really believe in them? Like, and I'm going to get a little political right now, but I have a hard time believing that a teacher who supports Trump can really be a great teacher to say Mexican students, to say Black students. If you're not really, like, how do you balance those two things where you feel one way? Like, what does making America great again look like in terms of the environment you create for your students in your classroom? Because our vibe, it comes out. It comes out in the things we say. It can come out in the way you read a child's name off of the roster. Like, what energy are you bringing to the classroom? No one can really teach you that. That's like some soul searching stuff that you have to really look and see, do I check for these kids or don't I? And then if you don't, then teaching might not be the best career for you, because it's a work of heart. I would be remiss if I sat here and gave you well, maybe you could do this, you could do that. You could throw up all the posters, all the decorations, but if it's not there, it's not there. And the kids know. They know who likes them and who doesn't. Any teacher who's even questioning, now I'm going to say this, there is a difference between a teacher who can say, I've identified some ugly things inside of me, and I'm going to use myself as an example. 3 years ago, a Muslim student, I actually about this on my website, and I noticed myself prior to having the student in my neighborhood, there were more Muslim women moving in, but I would see the women more outside, and they were in their full hijabs and burqas, and I would cross the street. And as a Black woman, as someone who knows that feels like, I started to question myself, because there was an ugly part of me coming out. Like, is stuff I'm hearing in the media getting to me? Like, what is going on? Because I don't like how I'm acting. Sure enough, that's September, my classroom, a Muslim student and his mother and sister walked in, hijabs, full, like everything that I'm so afraid of. Classroom. I had to address it. How did I address it? Soul searching, researching, looking at things online, actually having conversations. So I went to that parent and I was really transparent with her and confessed, really. Like, not in the middle of the school year, because I actually liked her son a lot. Super smart, like a really great kid. And I confessed to her, sorry, like, this is how I felt about you when you first walked through my door. She started to teach me Arabic. She invited me to her mosque. Like, it just, because I was willing to address the ugliness in me and become transparent, can I tell you, we still talk to this day? He's no longer my student. I don't even teach in the school anymore. We still talk, and she and I developed a relationship. What I, as a teacher, had to realize, you're bringing some ugly stuff into the classroom. It could affect the student. You need to check yourself with that. How many teachers are willing to actually do that when we're always right and we know, and in that space, we're in charge?
Yeah. That was fantastic. First of all, the fact that you would go and tell someone that is like kind of blowing my mind a little bit, right? Where like you can check yourself in private, or like I could tell my wife and be like, I kind of messed up and I did this weird thing. But I often am talking to my students about your ability to have difficult or uncomfortable conversations. It really your success in anything has so much to do with that, right? Like I've been with my wife for this summer, it's 23 years, and we haven't been married that long, but we've been together since high school. And I've had to have a million, literally, I cannot count how many uncomfortable conversations. And I think that leads to success in everything. And even, I think another great thing you brought up was just asking. Like when I don't understand things about, so when Ramadan was going on this year, I kind of realized that I didn't fully understand what this was. And typically I eat lunch with I eat lunch with students twice a day. And it made me really think that like certain kids weren't showing up, and I wasn't even cognizant to the fact that like they are fasting, and it's hard to be in a room with a bunch of kids that are eating lunch, even if it's crappy West Philly lunch, which is like the worst lunch imaginable. But even that is difficult, and made me think that maybe next year we could do like one of the lunches is I'm eating with the kids, and the other lunch, you know, we're creating a space where kids that are fasting can be. Or this year, and not to like put myself on a high horse, because I did it for one day. I fasted for the entire day, and it was so incredibly hard. I was starving. I was getting pissed off at kids in class, and I'm like, had to keep apologizing. Like, really sorry. I haven't eaten anything all day, and I know that's part of it. Is I'm not even supposed to talk about the fact that I'm fasting, because it takes away from it. But that's why I'm yelling at you, and it's not your fault. But what is, you know, so I think those are two really, really noteworthy things that I will end up thinking about even when we're finished. Whitney, how do you go about creating a safe space? What's important to you, or important for you to have the kids know coming into your classroom, or even to wherever it is that you're being, to know that they are cared for and safe?
Right. So I think what Vivett spoke about is being reflective. And I work with graduate students who are either teaching and a lot of times I speak to them about the power of being reflective. That none of us are perfect. We all have our own things within us. So like what that was speaking, I noticed the other day that when I ask a child to do something for me, like carry something, I'm asking the boys, I'm asking the male students, oh, can you do this? I don't ask the female students, because in my mind, it's my own form of system. Yes. In my mind, I'm assuming boys, they can handle, they can carry this. I'm not going to ask the girls. And so I had to really check myself. And it was a conscious decision. Like I stopped myself and say, no, can you do it? And because automatically, without even thinking, if I'm just going through, my first response is to go ask the male student to do this. And this is very early for them. Kids, but it's very early, and I'm teaching them something when I do that, like, and I have to be aware of that. So I think being reflective is extremely important. Letting you make mistakes sometimes too. I'm not perfect. One time I got very upset with one of my students, and we both calmed down. I had to apologize to him. And I said, I'm sorry. I lost my temper. And he said, no, he was only in third grade. He said, no, I'm sorry. I lost my temper too. I shouldn't have said that. But, we had that conversation, and you're apologizing to a third grader because I was wrong. So I did apologize to a third grader. And I'm also teaching him something. I'm teaching him that just because you are in a situation, which I have, and that technically doesn't mean that you abuse that power, that you can't be wrong. So I'm showing him that even though I don't have to apologize, I am going to apologize to you because I value our relationship, and I am wrong sometimes. But I think besides being reflective is going back to that key piece about being vulnerable. And you sort of spoke to that earlier, where people feel like they're going to lose their power. I'm actually reading a book called The Myth of the Nice. You could use being nice, if that's your genuine personality, as capital in interactions with other people. That when you are genuinely nice to people, when you are genuinely kind, people tend to respond in kind. Yes. They tend to do things for you that they wouldn't do for someone else because they believe that you are genuinely a good person. You know what? She would do it for me. So let me do this. And I think that has helped me tremendously in my teaching, because there's some children, when they go somewhere else, they're, I don't want to hear anything she has to say. But if you ask them, like, listen, can you blah, 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 all right, yeah, I'm willing to do it. So I do feel like, there's been a lot of power for me in discovering who I am, being aware of who I am, where I am strong, where I have faults. I tend to be a very sarcastic person. I've had to tone that down a lot when dealing with the kids because they don't get it, and it could be in a quick second, something that we think is funny or flip. They're like, So I had to tone that down a lot. But also the part of me where I want to be very real and authentic, I think has helped me make a lot of connections with my students in the classroom. And I don't think that, it starts very early and it goes up till they're older, where you let them know that, you're human. And I think what you said was important too. Some people make a child coming to you about yourself. Oh, I don't know what to say. I'm flustered. I don't blah, blah, blah. And then it becomes all about listening. You're not present. But just the power of your presence is something that we should hold on to. The fact that you're there, that you're willing to listen, you're teaching them something by doing that. You're showing them that you value them, that you care. And we all have our day-to-day, limitations. There's sometimes right now, right? But I'd love to talk to you at lunch, or I'd love to talk to you at this time, or I'll give you 5 minutes at the end of the day. Maybe I'm not saying that you have to completely shut down your whole classroom every time a child wants to talk to you, but letting them know that there is that time, there is that place, you're willing to listen to them, knowing things about them. Even like the survey with Vivett said, showing up to a game if you can, showing up to a talent show. They get excited when they see you outside of school. Oh, you came. Knowing that they like this and just asking them a question. They like basketball, starting a conversation with them. I had a student who was teaching me Spanish. He was like, so every day we would go through and he would teach me words. I messed up a lot of words, but he was thrilled to be able to, teach me these things, and he felt important. So there are little things that I feel like don't take a lot of your time. You're willing to do. You show the students, not by your words even, but by your actions, that you value them, and they're an in of your classroom. Without them, a classroom. I need you guys here. We are a community. We do need to work together. And I think another important piece of that is how you treat other students. Not only are they watching how you treat them, they're watching how you treat the other students. And even those students that you said, those students who are driving, that we're paying so much attention to because we're putting out fires, they're watching how you interact with them. Even though they may tell that you may be annoyed or you're frustrated, how do I treat someone when I'm annoyed or frustrated? Am I screaming, am I belittling them now? Because they will replicate that behavior in your classroom. If the next time someone gets on their nerves, why can't I scream at them? Why can't I call them names if that's what you do? If instead you just say, you know what, walk away, I'm going to do this, they will live up. Absolutely. So I think so being kind, finding that piece of yourself, being reflective is extremely important, in your actions more so than your words will say a lot. Monitor how you talk about people, how you talk about the students. And those little spaces of kindness and caring go a long way for creating your class.
I think you're saying so many important things there. And one of the things that's really sticking out to me is there have been times when I have not gotten my laundry done, I've had to wear the same pair of pants. Like, I'll wear them twice in a week or 3 times in a week. And the kids are like, Reynolds, you've been wearing those pants for 3 days now. And I'm like, if you think that kids aren't going to notice something like that, and then they're not going to notice the fact that how you really treat people, or that you say you really care, but what you're showing them, like your words aren't matching your actions, you're fooling yourself when they notice everything. Like if they notice that my ears were pierced before, or they notice, I don't know, like that I got new shoes, or every single time I get a haircut, or the fact that I feel like I can't shave if I get a beard in the middle of the year. I can't shave it because it's going to throw everybody off, right? Like I can't have a normal class because everyone's going to be going, wait, did you shave, Reynolds? And I'm thinking, you have no idea what's going on right now in class, but I can see the wheels have been spinning about whether or not I shaved last night or something. Like that's what you get hung on. I want to respect your time, but I have one more question, if you wouldn't mind. Is that cool?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so Ella Jane is asking, I had a child last year that was having behavioral problems. I tried to shelter his mom from a lot of it because I felt like she was overwhelmed with 4 kids at home and by herself. Is that a correct assumption? Or do you think that she wanted to know all of this and that she could take care of it at home? Just wondering so I can support the child at school as well as at home. So what would your suggestion be even if it's a student, like if we go back to our original topic, someone who is dealing with, that I feel like sometimes what's going on at home, like someone's sick, someone has a lot going on, someone has a spouse that's incarcerated, or do you find yourself making those phone calls, or you try and handle a lot of that stuff in-house?
Well, I think for me, in my experience, a lot of it is not that you're contacting the parent. From in my experience, most parents want to know what's going on. Actually, it can come back to bite you if, you know, something really does happen. And then you're saying, well, this has been the parent's like, I didn't find out about it.
Right.
A lot of times for me, it's been the way that people communicate with the parents, that the parents have a problem with communication itself. So if you're calling, you're exasperated, you're frustrated, if you're like picking up the phone and you're like, he did this, blah, 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 and they sense that tone in your voice that you're frustrated, then it sets off alarm bells. Well, I'm doing the best I can. And but I had a student who was, before I had him, instantly in trouble. The mom wouldn't answer the phone for the school anymore at all. When she saw the, that was that. She wasn't even going to take the calls anymore. But it took me a while. I had to build up a relationship with her. I had to contact her about good things. So every time I was contacting her, she didn't think it was a negative thing. You know, we went on trips. I would send her pictures. Or, you know, I would say, you know, he did great today. So then when it came time for me to talk stuff, she was willing to speak to me. And I also had to be respectful of, she was a working mom. So the best way that she liked to communicate was on WhatsApp. If I text her on WhatsApp versus calling her or whatever, she responded right away. She had the information. So, but I had to be willing to find that out. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't recommend, you know, keeping things from her to feel like you're protecting her or whatever the case may be. Now, that being said, I would weigh the importance of what you have to say. You know, if he left milk on the table at lunch, I don't think you need to call home about that. But if these are genuine concerns you want to work on, but presenting yourself as, I care about your child in the same that you care about your child. I'm not telling you this to get your child in trouble. I'm telling you this because I know he can do better. I want him to do better. I want him to improve. And I feel like I've had, for the most part, a really positive reception from parents as long as I monitor the way I'm approaching the situation. And sometimes if you feel like you have a really busy parent, I mean, I have some kids who have daily, it has morning, prep, lunch, afternoon, and I'm in the lower grade, so smiley face, okay face, sad face, and a place for comments if I have to write comments. The parents know it's coming home daily. They signed it. They send it back. And that's the way that I don't have to be intrusive if you have a lot going on, but you still feel like you have to be involved. Because I feel like mom may feel like she's open, but if she doesn't know what's going on with her, it's just another layer of guilt, because now not only do I have all these things going on, but I'm not even keeping up with what's my son at school. I don't know what's going on. So I think the important thing there would just be to be mindful of how you approach the situation and maybe talk to mom. Okay, what would be best for you, for me to communicate with you? Do you want me to send a paper home every day? Do you want me, you know, to email, to set up a school email address? But ask the parents. And I think that's a big theme in general today, not just with the parents, but with the kids, is talk to them. If you have a question about how they'd like to be contacted or what they'd like to do, them. If you have a question like to refer to their parents or what you could do to support them, ask them. And I think that's extremely important. But I do think she should still communicate for her own job, for the benefit of the child and for the benefit of the parent, but just work out a way that, you know, works for everyone and lets the parent know that you're in it for the right reasons, you're communicating for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Really, we want to forge a relationship with home. It's a school-home connection. So by not letting a parent know you're actually doing service, you're making some assumptions that because the mom has 4 children that she's not able to handle hearing information about one of her other children. There's just a lot. So sometimes what we do with best intentions can really come across the wrong way. Because as a parent, and I am a parent, if I heard that, my instinct would be like, who told you I didn't need to hear about my child? Who are you? That determination, you're overstepping your boundaries, you're thinking for me. Now, if this parent has given the teacher reason to believe that they're disconnected, they're not engaged, then that's a different story. But I would still really, everything Whitney said was just right. One of the things the teacher could do in this, as she approaches the new school year, a simple index card, name, date, you know, address, best way to contact you. And that's it. You know what I mean? I feel comfortable giving my parents a cell phone number because I always have my cell phone. I might not always check the school's, you know, correspondence portal, but text me if something's going on. I like to have that level of transparency and openness with my parents. If they choose to utilize it, that's fine. Are there some that sometimes overstep it? Yes. And then you just let them know, okay, I'm off, but I'm rather that than the opposite where they're not able to reach me. And believe it or not, once you create that relationship, and you touched on that before, it's about relationship building no matter what the relationship is. You have to, the parent, like, I'm invested in your child the way you are, and whatever I can do to help you, even if you don't, parent is 100% on board, because that goes back to your views about them as a parent. Unless they're abusing the child and you're not functioning as a mandated reporter, it's really not for you to judge that in that way to the point where it stops you from reaching out to them. As a teacher, you might want to write about that in reflective journal. Sarcasm intended, because there's something going on there.
Yeah, I think even as a parent, my view on that changed a lot after I had kids, where I didn't always call home because I either didn't think it was that big of a deal, or I wanted, there's a lot with the boys that I teach that, like, if the sense I get is that they don't want me to call home because they want to be seen as a man and not as like a little kid anymore, right? They're in high school now and they want that relationship. And so that's always my first approach is like, look, I don't want to have to call home. Let's have this conversation. But if I do have to call home, this is what it's going to sound like. And then I tell them what exactly I'm going to say when I call home. But now having a child, I cannot stand if I find something out that I didn't hear about, like it's now I have to call you. And now it is kind of awkward, right? Like, hey, you didn't call me and tell me that this incident happened on the playground today, or something happened in school or whatever. And my wife is even, when I talk to the school, I always kind of warn them and say, like, look, you're talking to me now. Like, if my wife has to call, then it's like the gloves are off and it's going to get just this thing with her neck that goes around, and it's scary looking. But I just think that you're better off kind of making the call sometimes, just to like even cover your bases, because you don't want to assume what's going on at home, that anything, right? Like until you have a reason to know that. Like, if you know something's going on, it's a different story maybe. But listen, before I let you go, I would like I don't have these now, but what I would like to have for viewers is some of the books that you were talking about. And I wrote everything down that you said, but there are other resources that you think would really benefit folks, if you could just like shoot me a quick message with those so that I could put those in the show notes, and kids that are dealing with this, that would be awesome. What is that you're holding up?
We can send a list of different books.
Yes.
And all to different stuff, but there are some available. And I'm actually working on a children's book that I'm going to self-publish. So when I do that, it's actually written. I'm looking for a youth who has an incarcerated parent to do the illustrations, because I think that is important. But I'll let you know about that as well.
That is fantastic. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So that folks that are listening to this, it's hard to jot things down, or a lot of times people are driving and they're like, I didn't catch what you said. And then there's an hour-long conversation. I don't know where it was. So all those resources will be below for anyone that's watching this and you want to follow up. And then the other thing I'll say out loud, you can do this if you wish. When this shows up on YouTube, I get a lot of comments on YouTube. And feel free to, if you see the video on there, if someone addresses something, if someone asks you a question, people get weird about this. This is why I'm putting it out there. People get weird that like someone else is answering questions in their comment section. What we're trying to do with this channel and with the community that I'm part of is like opening up the dialogue. And then this can sometimes be the conversation starter. But, if, someone has a question and they're mulling over this and it comes up later, there's that space to be able to like ask a question and keep that conversation going.
Can I just mention, I didn't want to get off and not tell that for educators who are in the United States, October is actually See Us, Support Us Month, which is a movement nationally for incarcerated parents to be heard, for their voices. So if you, as Vivett mentioned, the Osborne Association, they have a page. They update about C4 this month. On Facebook, the New York Initiative for Children of Incarcerated Parents updates that. But in October, there's a lot of things for you to go to panels, for you to get resources. So that is a big month for children who have incarcerated parents. And if it's a topic that educators are interested in, or they really want to learn more, it's right at the beginning of the school year that it happens. And there's a lot of great work going on through that. So we could send something about that too. But I just want to mention that if people don't know, October is See Us Support Us Month, and it is for children who have incarcerated parents. And it's a great time to really jump thing.
Fantastic. That's a great space. And great in the beginning of the school year when everyone still has energy to do stuff and they're not tired. So listen, don't click off after we end this because I still want to speak with you, but thank you so much for coming on. I hope that this is a resource for people that really gives them some information to go forward with, especially this school year. And I get a lot of first year teachers that are constantly hitting me up for information about all kinds of random stuff. So I'm glad that I have this as a resource to point them to really give them some real stuff to kind of mull over. So thanks again. And everyone that's watching this, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the section below. I'd be happy to answer anything or forward anything that isn't for me or that I feel like I can't answer. And so thanks so much for watching, guys. Peace.